This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by Smile, the makers of the brand new PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPhone and iPad, as well as PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, PDF Pen for iPhone, PDF Pen for iPad, Text Expander Touch, and Disk Label. Find out more about all their great products at smilesoftware.com. Welcome to Mac Voices. This is the Talk of the Mac community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, you've heard me talk plenty of times about being a very satisfied CrashPlan customer, the software and service from Code42. This time, though, they have a new product that I wanted to introduce you to that may not be for everyone, but for those of you who need it, I think you're going to need it, no question. I'm happy to welcome Andrew Renz of Code42 to Mac Voices. He is what I think, Andrew, you said one of your titles is Senior Enterprise Engineer?
Yes.
How many other titles do you have, Andrew?
My real title is Principal Architect, which is similar to that. I am an enterprise engineer where I will essentially make our technologies fit into a given enterprise when they're looking to go ahead and start implementing it.
The fact that then we're talking to someone who works in the enterprise, I would assume means that SharePlan, which is the new product, is an enterprise product.
It is.
All right, so why don't we ask you to walk us through SharePlan, what it offers, and what kind of problems it can solve for us?
Sure. SharePlan actually came about, from our enterprise customers saying, you've done a really great job protecting our data in a various different kind of myriad of architectures that we support. It could be a private cloud, it could be a hybrid cloud, or it could be public cloud. And we protect very, very large enterprises around the world. A lot of logos that you would definitely recognize, especially a lot of the technology companies here in the Bay Area where I live. And they said, you have all this data. Now it would be awesome if we could do other things with it. If we can get the same bits of data synced across the devices that each of our employees own, and also across, within project groups or other things like that, securely within our enterprise. And we said, that sounds like a great idea. And when we first looked at it, it was probably less of a solution for adding a bunch of those types of features to CrashPlan. And so it made less and less sense to kind of bolt those on there instead of just coming up with a kind of first-rate sync and share kind of platform for the enterprise. And that's what we delivered in SharePlan.
So it's very refreshing to hear a developer of any kind say, we decided to go with a new product instead of bolting on a whole lot of new features. Unfortunately, bolting on new features can be a good thing up to a point, but often then it sinks the original product. And I mean S-I-N-K.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what we really saw is backup, and CrashPlan had a really good reputation for being able to protect data, but still stay completely invisible from basically the user on that machine, so they can continue to get their work done, and we don't interfere. With something like sync and share and collaborate, you do want to interact with it more, and so those are two different paradigms that you kind of need to juggle. The other thing that we really recognized is when you are doing the protect story, that I need to back up my entire machine, you want to protect everything on there, and you probably don't want to share everything on your laptop. So it's a different set of goals, and that's where we realized that it needs to be a separate product.
So is SharePlan a backup product or a collaboration product, or
it's a sync and collaborate? And what we did is we designed it so it has a lot of synergies between CrashPlan and SharePlan. So it's actually now a single service that runs on the endpoint device to do both backup and all the sync and collaborate. And the cool part is it uses all of the really tried and trusted, as well as kind of admired CrashPlan technologies under the hood. So it's deduplicating data before it syncs it between your devices and between other users that are collaborating on it. It's actually intelligently discovering your peer network. So we call it topology-aware acceleration. It can actually basically move bits around within a LAN instead of having to move it up to the SharePlan server and back down again every time. So it's a lot of the same stuff that we've kind of perfected in CrashPlan, but just reapplied in a different manner for sync and collaborate.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So let's talk about the collaboration part. Are we talking about real-time collaboration, or are we talking about just the kind of syncing the kind of collaboration that syncing means? Usually that if I work on a document today, you can open it up tomorrow and you've got the new copy of the document.
Right. Yeah, it's very similar to that, except it is real time. So as soon as you save changes, those are actually pushed to me. And just like CrashPlan, we're doing a byte differential, essentially dedupe on those. So as soon as you save a new version, just the new changed bytes will get synced back to me, and I'll have the updates. It's our idea to kind of do that in real time instead of, there's some of the other share tools out there on the internet, they kind of force you to upload things and then re-download them or whatever else. We wanted to kind of remove that time lag and make it much more real time. And the other thing that we really didn't want to do is have a web-centric, where you have this web portal where you're uploading things and then downloading them again. We want to work on our devices. If I want to use Pages, I want to be able to actually just use the Pages application here and then save it and have that data synced across my devices, and then maybe with you if I'm collaborating on it as well. So it's native integration into essentially the file system on all of these endpoints.
So when you say real time, if we both have a Pages document open, we're both making changes, what happens then? Because that's always a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, there's conflict management. So there's, under the hood, some really sophisticated things so that each endpoint device has time essentially negotiated from the SharePlan server. So there is no possibility that any of those changes would ever get lost. And essentially, SharePlan is keeping track of all the contributions that each person kind of contributes. And if there is a conflict, it'll actually create a conflict file, at least in this version. And so you can actually see who did what, and it's actually tagged in there that way.
So I may jump off the track here a little bit. Does that mean that SharePlan also has something akin to document change tracking?
Yes. Essentially, everything that happens within a plan is actually, if you want to think of the SharePlan server as the court reporter, it receives all of those changes, and it's actually storing everything in a CrashPlan archive on the back end. So within that archive, we have everything that's happened, who joined the plan, who contributed files, who changed them, and all the different versions are actually always maintained in that. So yes, you can actually go back in time if you needed to, or pull different files out. All that stuff is available.
I hesitate to start drawing too many comparisons, but sometimes they're just inevitable. Where are the documents stored, or is SharePlan being a server and just tracking, say, the changes?
Right. So SharePlan was designed, a little bit differently than, let's say, some of the established players in the market, like Dropbox or Box, where just like CrashPlan in the enterprise, we allow our customers to choose their given architecture. So a lot of times, large enterprises that aren't ready to trust their data to the cloud, they say, great, let's do a private cloud where we essentially can set up a bunch of CrashPlan servers and create a private cloud that way. We protect lots of large enterprises. And so SharePlan works exactly the same way. We can do private cloud. We can also do hybrid cloud, where you can actually mix our public cloud that we have an enterprise offering for and an on-premise private cloud. And then we also have public cloud as well. And SharePlan was designed for all three of those. That was a big ask from our enterprise customers who have used those other tools and said, our employees are using these things. We're not really comfortable with our data kind of leaving our corporate network and living on somebody else's cloud infrastructure. Can you deliver a private cloud, interpretation of that? And that's why, just like CrashPlan, we're allowing folks to kind of choose their given architecture with SharePlan as well.
So basically, if I'm understanding right, I can have something that is strictly in my office, singular to my organization, or it can be a little more spread out, singular to my organization, but spread out over different locations.
Exactly. Yes. It just depends on the size of your organization. So it even could be, we have a lot of our CrashPlan Pro E customers that, will just essentially set up a CrashPlan server with, 10 users that they're backing up to, right? and it scales all the way to hundreds of thousands. We have very, very big enterprise customers that are that large, right? And they need to set up destinations around the world or integrate our cloud in there. Maybe they have good network here in the United States, but maybe internationally they don't have such a good data center presence, as an example. And we say, no problem. We can actually target those folks' data to be protected into our cloud. But securely, and all the cryptography and everything else will happen within their network on that secure master server.
You said the magic word, cryptography. That's another big issue here when we're talking about any kind of data that's getting outside of the walls of our businesses. And how secure is it? Who can tap into it? And what happens in the event of a theft? What happens in the event of intercepted traffic? What happens in the event of just a plain old lost computer?
Right. That's always applicable. If you've used CrashPlan before, we encrypt all data at read before we ever move it to any of the given destinations. And we're unique in the consumer space because we allow our consumers to elect to kind of essentially upgrade their security model, where they have a private data key that encrypts their escrowed encryption key with a private data password, which means we can store their data securely, but we never have the mathematical ability to look at it. For enterprise, we do a very similar thing, except we essentially give them the key escrow server that they can manage on site all by themselves on premise. So the data that we store in their cloud has a really good separation of power. SharePlan is designed the same way as CrashPlan. So we encrypt everything at read. It stays encrypted, as it moves, to the SharePlan server or across, users or whatever else. So all of that encryption is actually built in. The most important part about cryptography is who has access to the keys. And that's why we're still allowing folks to essentially choose their architecture with SharePlan. They can do a private or hybrid or, public cloud with an on-premise master server to essentially do that key escrow.
If you would go back to, I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure what you called it, but the local node aware thing where it discovers other machines or other users on your own network.
Yeah, absolutely. We call that topology aware acceleration. So essentially, what SharePlan can do is intelligently discover other SharePlan clients that are within its own LAN network. So if you think about a global organization that's stretched across, multiple sites, connected with a WAN backbone to different data centers and things like that, it was our idea that it makes much more sense to move data as efficiently as possible whenever we can. So if two clients are on the same LAN network and I need to send an update to you and we're on the same network, why not just send the update directly to you instead of sending it to the SharePlan server and then having you download it directly? So essentially, we can use that peer network to move data around very, very quickly within an enterprise, as well as keeping the SharePlan server kind of as part of the game, as the court reporter, if you would. So it still receives all the changes, but we've moved the data much, much faster than if we had to push it directly to that server every time.
Very interesting concept, and it makes a lot of sense. I
Exactly.
imagine it's not quite so easy to implement, though.
It's really, really hard, but latency kills, and that's really what we're trying to kind of solve by using all these edge devices that actually have a lot of memory, a lot of CPU. They have their data there. Let's kind of enroll them into a distributed cloud, if you would, where we can actually use that free bandwidth on the LAN to move bits around much more efficiently.
So from the user perspective, how easy is it to work on a Pages document using SharePlan? Am I opening it in a different environment, or is it all working in the background?
We are natively integrated into, the Finder on OS X, Windows Explorer on Windows. We have apps for iOS and Android. So it's natively integrated into those platforms. So essentially on a Mac, as an example, you would actually just have a SharePlan directory in your home folder, and you can write files there, you can copy them into, you can do everything that you're used to doing with other, Dropbox-like technologies. It's all right there in that folder. We took it one step further, though, because at Code42, we firmly believe that we should make technology work for you instead of working for your technology. So we didn't want to force all those users to essentially have to store everything in that SharePlan directory. So just like CrashPlan is actually watching across your file system, SharePlan is doing the same thing. you could actually right-click on any folder on your computer and say, make this a plan, and then it'll be managed by SharePlan, and it doesn't actually have to live in your folder. Also, if you get invited to a plan and it's now part of a project or whatever else that's being synced and it's in that SharePlan directory, you say, no, yeah, that's one of my projects, and you can pick it up and move it anywhere else on your hard drive, and it will continue to be managed and updated by SharePlan as well.
So that sounds almost too good to be true. So I can move things around just as I normally would, maybe change document folders, change project folders in the Finder or however I manage my device, but those materials just keep on being managed by SharePlan as if I were storing them in a dedicated folder.
Exactly. Yep. Because we're watching our file system. We're actually plugged into FS events on the Mac. So we know everything that's actually changing in your file system in real time, and that's how we can keep track of all those things. The other cool thing that enterprises always are asking for that we delivered in SharePlan is, let's say that we were participating in a project. We have a shared plan that way, but I am no longer part of that project. What can I do from the enterprise side of things to make sure that I no longer have access to those files, or maybe I'm no longer an employee or whatever else? So any bit of managed data that SharePlan is essentially managing has a remote data kill capability. So we're not going to kill the entire hard drive, but I can just be removed from that marketing collateral project, and just those files will actually disappear from my endpoint device, kind of ad hoc that way. It's another one of our intentions to always build things for, consumers in the enterprise. This whole bring your own device to work concept and things like that. So if you're bringing your own device into work, we don't want to have to kill the entire thing if you don't have access to that anymore. So we can actually just remove access to individual plans or all of your SharePlan sync data and stuff like that, and then remove the files actually from the endpoint as well.
So it actually removes the files. It just doesn't lock them or just doesn't update them anymore. It deletes them. Like if an administrator, you're probably not familiar with the CrashPlan admin console for enterprise, but the SharePlan one is very similar, where an administrator can go in and say, oh, I need to, remotely, select data or whatever else. For SharePlan, that administrator can actually say, oh, Andrew no longer has access to this. Let me go ahead and remove him from this plan. And then all the associated data would actually disappear from my device. That's very nice. That's very nice.
End users in an ad hoc manner, they're going to add themselves to different plans. I might create a plan and then invite you to be part of it, and then I could take access from you from that plan if I needed to, all through the SharePlan interface if I needed to do that too. So it's really built so users can empower themselves to create these plans and invite other users and decide what they need to actually sync across their devices and actually collaborate on as well.
Do I need to worry about the fact that you're watching my files all the time?
We're only watching the ones that you've essentially said, SharePlan, please manage this. And that's it. That's all we're keeping track of, is the stuff that you've elected to kind of enroll yourself into.
Okay. So let's talk about the implementation. We talked about from a user perspective. How about from the administrator perspective? What does it take to load onto my MacBook Pro or onto my Windows PC or whatever to run SharePlan? What kind of resources are required? That kind of thing.
So SharePlan is actually our 4th generation platform, if you want to call it that. So CrashPlan Pro E and the CrashPlan that you use at home is actually it's our 3rd version. SharePlan is our next one. So it is actually native. It's native for Windows, it's native for Mac, it's native on iOS and Android and everything else. So from an enterprise deployment perspective, it's just an installer, and you could push it out. A lot of times enterprises use desktop management tools like Casper Suite for the Mac or whatever, so they can actually remotely push install that and actually have it show up on my Mac without me having to do anything as an end user. Of course, you can still sign yourself up and install it if you needed to, but a lot of enterprises actually do the silent push install. And it's just like CrashPlan. CrashPlan has always done that for a while. And now we're actually bridging them back together again. So you can actually deploy one thing and then say turn on CrashPlan or turn on SharePlan, that kind of thing.
This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Smile. the makers of the brand new PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPhone and iPad, as well as PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, PDF Pen for iPhone, PDF Pen for iPad, Text Expander Touch, and Disk Label. Find out more about all their great products at smilesoftware.com. Smile recently added another winner to their stable of world-class products with PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPhone and iPad. I'm on a mission to try to make my life as paperless as possible while not being obsessive about it. At home, that's pretty easy, but out and about, you tend to gather up lots of little pieces of paper that clutter your pocket, get tossed on your dresser at night so it looks like a snowstorm hit, and somehow get discarded irresponsibly in one of those cleanup frenzies that occurs when you get desperate. That's happening far less now that I have PDF Pen Scan Plus. Just take that receipt, slap it down on the table, scan it, and it's in the PDF Pen Scan Plus library. I can OCR it right then and there so the text is searchable, or just leave it as an image. But why would I do that since all the OCR is handled on board and doesn't have to use any bandwidth? When done, I can share to all sorts of places like Dropbox, Evernote, Google Drive, email, the list goes on and on. Then I can tuck that annoying little piece of paper somewhere appropriate and dispose of it properly, like through the shredder, safe in the knowledge that I have a copy on my phone or wherever else I've put it. And that's just one of the uses for PDF Pen Scan Plus. What are you doing with it to make your life easier? Send an email to chuck@macvoices.com and let me know. PDF Pen Scan Plus from Smile. Just one more program and a line of great software for your Mac, iPhone, and iPad. Thanks to Smile for sponsoring this edition of Mac Voices. This is clearly designed as an enterprise product, but still, I could see some things I might like to do with it. But what kind of cost are we talking about here to sign up for SharePlan, and how is the pricing structured?
The pricing is structured by the user. So, within a business or enterprise or whatever else, it's just priced by the number of folks that you would like to actually be participants in SharePlan, and it's just licensed that way. I think its MSRP is $10 per month per user. So it's very, reasonable for enterprises to be able to sign up for that and then deploy it. And that's, suggested retail pricing. I'm on the engineering side of things, but from my experience in enterprise, selling, there's probably going to be discounts for getting multiple users at a time and all that kind of stuff.
And that's basically, it's all software. I don't have to install a server at my office or in my location if I don't want to. I'm hearing that I can if I want to, but I don't need to.
Yes, it's your choice. You could do private cloud. The SharePlan server is actually free. So you could download that and run it on whatever storage infrastructure that you have. You could use our managed private cloud. A lot of our big enterprise customers do that. And that's a really neat way to actually get a lot of the benefits of the cloud, but actually bring that inside your network and actually store things on premise. It's actually the same devices that we use in our cloud, but we remotely monitor and manage it for our enterprise customers. They really, really like that. Or you could also do the cloud. And you have flexibility to intermix those wherever you need to as well.
$10 per person per month. Any limitations on what kind of data I'm sharing or collaborating on? And I'm frankly thinking, it's one thing to share a spreadsheet or two. It's a whole other one to share, video assets, audio assets, those kind of things.
SharePlan was built for that kind of stuff, so it has no limitations on the number of versions, the size of files, the number of participants. When we say unlimited, we've always stood behind that. We do that for CrashPlan Consumer too. We designed SharePlan to be the same way. We don't want to make something and then say, yeah, it's not going to work for this, scenario, whatever. So we really designed it to kind of scale horizontally wherever needed. So yes. We think, video collaboration and things like that would be a great use of SharePlan, especially because it's so efficient on moving bits around. There's a real physics to data. The bigger the files are, the harder it is to get it between me and you. Put it on a flash drive and FedEx it and all that kind of stuff. We just think, let's be really efficient on the network, and then we can actually start enabling kind of new sharing of data across those networks and do it really well.
Yeah, forgive me for going off on this tangent, but I'm very intrigued as to a bit by bit comparison of a video file. That I would think has a lot of very positive implications if you can actually pull it off. And given that it's Code42, I'm assuming you're pulling it off.
Yeah, SharePlan is just like CrashPlan, where we're essentially looking at files at the byte level and figuring out what is different from this last thing that I've seen before and what is there now. If we can basically say that 90% of this is the same as what I already have stored, and it's just the new 10% that I need to move around, we will go ahead and deduplicate and then just move that 10%. So it could be very efficient in those cases. Is it designed for sharing and editing video? Probably not, right? We're really going all the way down to the byte level of files. But it can work for pretty much anything that way, which makes it agnostic to the file type, right? It could be a big DMG, or it could be a big email archive. It could be a myriad of different things, and we design our technology to just not care, essentially. Just look at the bytes and figure out what you can deduplicate and what you can move around even more efficiently.
And I would assume that a bigger pipe, especially in that kind of scenario, is better. But
of course,
I'm sure you also include a utility of some kind to manage and throttle bandwidth as necessary.
Right. So SharePlan, the product, is designed so it doesn't have limitations on what its capabilities are. But IT administrators are always going to want to say, okay, now we've turned this on for our users. Do we also want them to be able to sync, very large .isos or very large files or whatever else? Can I start limiting those kind of things and discovering what they're sharing as well? Are they syncing these big files across? Maybe I don't want to do that. So they have the full ability, just like in CrashPlan for Enterprise, to go in and say, nope, these users can only sync 5 gigabytes of their data, or they can only sync these file types or whatever else. That's also built into SharePlan as well.
I wouldn't have thought of that right off, but it makes perfect sense, so that you can't have somebody hogging up the network or doing maybe things that you just don't want them to do.
Exactly. Inside the enterprise, it's how much rope do you want to give your users to hang themselves, right? So you can...
Wait a minute, I'm not sure that's a good way to say this.
The more choices that I can make as an administrator on behalf of my users, if it needs to fit a given enterprise policy, a good example would be in SharePlan. We essentially can store all versions and all deleted files forever, right? But to an enterprise, that might actually be scary. They probably want some virtual paper shredder setting to say, no, if it's been deleted after 30 days, let's make sure it actually doesn't exist anymore. So those kind of things interplay there, and that's where we give administrators the power to kind of choose those policies and kind of figure that out. Another good example would be, how much bandwidth do I want all of my Edge, CrashPlan, and SharePlan clients to actually use? Right? If I set this up in a small bandwidth, office remotely out somewhere, and the network administrator is going to hunt me down, wouldn't it be nice if I could remotely throttle just those users and say, okay, guys, you can use this much, and you do it all through the admin console, and then you push that setting out directly to them, and then they actually throttle back in real time. So there's a lot of use cases for administrators to have those kind of controls wherever they need to.
So I'm trying to find a downside to this, and I can't really find a downside so far. The pricing seems very affordable for the enterprise, and for small business too, that may be geographically dispersed. All these things, they're running through my head as to how affordable it is, how much control you're giving the administrator, and how easy it is to implement. And it sounds like I haven't seen the software, but it sounds like you've at least thought about this stuff and are trying to make it easy to access, easy to manage. Right.
Yeah, it might seem that way. If you really think about it, we're kind of latecomers to this market. But when Code42 really kind of thinks about stuff that way, we will go ahead and actually use all the technologies that we've had in CrashPlan and then apply them to SharePlan. So it's not like we're reinventing the wheel. We're just reapplying our existing kind of knowledge and our ability to do things like move bits around efficiently, or set up private clouds and public clouds and mix them together and all that kind of stuff, and then just reapply them to the sync and share market. So it is really cool. That said, some of the established players are coming at this from a different angle. Some of them are actually coming at it from the content management space, where you essentially want to upload files and then lock them for users and do all that. We're coming at it from a completely different direction, which is really easy to use sync and share for end users, and then giving administrators all the available controls that we discussed and all that kind of stuff as well, and kind of mixing them together.
And I'd say both perspectives have their merits. It just really depends on what your objectives are.
Right. Well, and so another little tidbit for you to that would be interesting is, so SharePlan, because we wanted to be native on all the platforms that we wanted to support from day one, it's actually a really big engineering ask to do that, to be native on Macs and Windows and iOS and Android all at the same time. And what we figured out is the best way to do it is actually the hard way, which is build your own API and then code all of your native applications to that API. And so that's what we did for SharePlan. So under the hood, there actually is an open source API that you can use to integrate further into these enterprise systems. Some enterprises might use Microsoft SharePoint, it's called, for doing their existing kind of stuff. So we thought, every enterprise is different. Let's give them the ability to integrate SharePlan however they see fit. And that API story plays really well into that. An enterprise could write their own corporate Evernote, right? Just using our API as an example, or integrate into SharePoint, or replace the email attachment, upload utility that they've had forever. All those things are possible because we're API based, and you can actually integrate with us and do different things that way.
You must be reading my notes, because one of the next things I wanted to get to were iOS apps, iPhones, iPads, and if we have to, Android. Do we have the same capabilities with our documents on those devices?
Absolutely. Yep. So from your iOS device, you can essentially have a SharePlan application on there, and anything that's being synced, across your devices will show up there automatically. You can turn on if you want the SharePlan application to use the 3G network or not. You can choose which plans. Do you actually want to sync the data, or just see plan updates and click on files and download them that way? So those iOS apps work great for iPhones and iPads to be able to have your data in real time on this smaller thing that I also have on my laptop. Also, it enables collaboration. I could be part of a group plan, and then I want to add another user. You can actually bring up the SharePlan iOS app and click on it, and then say, all right, let's go ahead and add John. And then it'll actually invite him, and he'll be part of that plan as well. So it's our intention to basically be as close as possible on the functionality across all those platforms. So if it's iOS, it's going to work the same as a Mac. It's going to work the same as Android even. Although Android it's a little bit of advantage than iOS, because we can actually natively integrate into the file system on an Android device. So you can essentially work on files just like you would on a real laptop on an Android. So we're taking full advantage of being native on all those platforms, basically. It makes it really fun.
Yeah, I'm not a programmer, but I would have thought that it would have been difficult to achieve this given Apple's pretty severe sandboxing guidelines or restrictions.
Exactly. Yes. So basically, you have the SharePlan app, you have your data in there, and then in iOS, what you do is integrate into the open-in API. Right. So if you click on a document in SharePlan on iOS, and then you say open in, then you can open it in Pages or whatever. And then from Pages, you're like, great, I'm done with this. Let's save it and then open it in SharePlan. So you're in a loop that way to move the data between those different applications. And that's just the limitation that Apple gives to all iOS developers. And we're playing nicely in their sandbox, to say that.
Yeah, well, they don't give you much choice, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
To make sure I understand that correctly, though, so I open my Pages document through SharePlan. It's then therefore not able to update in real time. Is that correct? It only
Correct.
Updates when it closes.
Right. So you would essentially open the document. It would be in Pages. You would save it, and then you would, from Pages, say open in SharePlan, and then it would be brought right back down into SharePlan. And then at that point, the update would actually trickle back through all your devices and or collaborators if you're participating in a group plan that way.
And to take it full circle, if it has created a conflict, there's a conflict notation created.
Exactly.
Got it. Very nice, very nice. So is this available now?
It is.
Okay.
We publicly released this the first week of October, and that was, our coming out party. We actually called it SharePlan 4.0 because it is our 4th generation platform, and that is available today. So if you want to go and download it off our website and try it out, we have lots of information available on our website. It's just code42.com/SharePlan. So we make it just as easy to use our software as trying it. If you want to go ahead and kick the tires or whatever else, we encourage you to go ahead and do so.
Great. Andrew, it's been fascinating. It sounds like a great product, a great solution for enterprise. Might be a little pricier, and I'm not really sure that the personal computer user, or the home user, even a single business user would have necessarily use for it, although there's probably some use cases, but a small business up to a very large business, it makes perfect sense.
Yes. Yeah. The consumer question has been posed to me before. When are you going to do SharePlan for consumers? And as of yet, we're evaluating that. I can't comment, specifically on our future plans that way, but there would be some cool advantages to being able to allow consumers to kind of create their own private clouds and be able to share data across their devices and do things like that as well. We can always take a look at that. But businesses were the primary driver of this. They're the ones that really need to be able to sync their data across private clouds and do this collaboration story and everything else. And that's what we wanted to tackle first.
Yeah, and you'd be inviting or starting to compete with a whole different set of other services and features if you were to move into the personal space. The enterprise space, I'm not sure if this is completely unique, but at the very least, it sounds like it's pretty cutting edge.
We've heard that in the enterprise space, the established players are all about the cloud, right? And your only option is the public cloud. And so once we start talking to enterprises about the ability to do very easy to use Dropbox-like share and sync within a private cloud, they become very interested because that's kind of essentially exactly what they've been asking for a long time. And that's really the design intention of SharePlan from the beginning, was to be able to support that.
Andrew, thank you so much for the time. This has been, again, very enlightening, and hopefully we can help spread the word a little bit to some enterprise customers about SharePlan. And I love the fact that they can go and, as you said, kick the tires a little bit without having to commit.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, thank you.
Great. And one more time, the website is?
Code42.com/SharePlan.
Perfect. Andrew, hope to talk to you again real soon. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Folks, I'll have links in the show notes to Code42, to CrashPlan, of course, and to SharePlan, so you can find it real easy. If you decide to kick the tires, let them know you heard about it on MacVoices. Until the next time, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, app.net, Google+, Facebook, and for more Apple, Mac, and tech-related shows, including MacVoices, Mac Notables, the Mac Jury, and the MacVoices Briefing. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com.